we identified that if you build a sensor with your hands, you will love data. The mathematics become your passion. Now that you collect this data, you want to plot it, you want to analyze it, only by connecting the cable. So we did this project, and the survey from the high schoolers say, connecting cable is making friends. Once you give them that 30 minutes on building the sensor, on the train, on the tramway, on the classroom, in 30 minutes, they believe if they connect the cables together, they're going to be discovering something with those cables of the data that it becomes theirs.
Hey GeoTrekkers, welcome to episode 36 of the GeoTrek podcast. This is the second podcast in a 3-part series recorded in the U.S. state of New Mexico, the land of enchantment. You're going to love this episode if you're passionate about field science, collecting environmental data, or have passion about hands-on education for students from middle and high school through college and graduate school. But before we get into this episode, we wanted to ask you to please subscribe to the GeoTrek podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Your subscription helps us track professional progress, helps us make new partnerships moving forward, and ensures many more podcast episodes in the future. Well, let's hop into it and come along with me on a journey to the land of enchantment. Last week, we explored the history of Santa Rosa, New Mexico, a small town in the eastern part of the state that saw a population explosion during the railroad era and was located right on iconic Route 66. We also discussed extreme droughts and floods in New Mexico's history, the most famous of which occurred in the late 1930s. Historian Dan Flores recounted how New Mexico quickly transitioned from extreme drought to extreme floods in 1937. This pattern of a quick transition from drought to flood happened again this year, although the floods were not as extreme. Nonetheless, New Mexico has been experiencing a complex set of natural hazards. For starters, the state is part of an ongoing extreme drought that has been impacting the southwestern U.S. for years. According to UCLA, this mega drought is the region's driest period in the last 1,200 years. How researchers go back so far in their analysis is a fascinating topic that we'll address in a future podcast episode. For this episode, the main point is that the drought is large, the drought is extreme, and unfortunately, it continues to get worse. The latest update from the U.S. Drought Monitor classifies 95% of the state in severe drought or worse, and 58% of the state in extreme drought or worse. The drought has tightened its grip on the region over the past year, as rain has been very scarce, as was feared with the ongoing La Niña weather pattern. The drought helped set the stage for one of the most severe wildfire seasons on record in New Mexico. According to the New York Times, by June 1st, more than 600,000 acres had burned, including more than 315,000 acres at the Hermit's Peak and Calf Canyon fire, the largest fire in the modern history of the state. Spring fires are a bad sign in this region, as they sometimes can set the stage for a complex hazard scenario if the monsoon rains come hard and early. Monsoon rains come to this region commonly in the summer months, from mid-June through the end of September, when prevailing winds come from the south, drawing up moisture from the Pacific Ocean, Gulf of California, and Gulf of Mexico. Heavy monsoon rains falling on burnt mountainsides are a recipe for disaster, as the tree canopy and vegetation present in a vibrant forest are suddenly absent after a wildfire. As a result, more of the rain quickly runs off the landscape, exacerbating flooding downstream. Unfortunately, this year, monsoon rains did come hard and early, causing the National Weather Service to issue flood watches, especially for areas downstream from the massive burn scars on the spring wildfire season. I traveled to this region during the last week of June to document the flooding in person. I encountered an unusual setting, as I was greeted with rain upon my arrival, but signs all around pointed to the extensive drought and wildfires. When I say signs, I mean literal signs, with road closures in the national forest where fires remained active, fire danger signs deployed in various locations, and other signs thanking firefighters for their service to save different communities. I was able to do some field reconnaissance in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, northwest of the city of Las Vegas, New Mexico. I came across a stream flowing through a burn scar where I immediately recognized that the stream was wider, with more extensive erosion in the section with burnt trees. Where trees remained unburned, the tree roots, grasses, and shrubs held the stream bank in place and prevented erosion. This excursion made me curious about this complex hazard. How well would this flooding be predicted? Because wildfires burn in erratic shapes. How do the flood models account for massive vegetation changes that recently happened on the mountainsides? Who's monitoring this fluid situation, pun intended, and how are they advancing the science in this area? My search led me to the Department of Civil, Construction, and Environmental Engineering at the University of New Mexico's main campus in Albuquerque. Assistant Professor Fernando Moreau leads an innovative team that is addressing these questions through data collection and field science. Dr. Moreau is director of the Smart Management of Infrastructure Laboratory, or SMILab, at University of New Mexico. The SMILab aims to develop the use of next-generation smart sensing technologies and strategies towards safer, cost-effective, resilient, and sustainable structures. He's also principal investigator for the National Science Foundation, or NSF-funded Civic Innovation Challenge. In this project, Native American Pueblo communities will build, design, and implement their own low-cost, efficient wireless intelligence sensors, or LUIS, networks. These networks will inform Pueblo communities of information to help prevent wildfires and provide critical information to early warning systems when wildfires and floods occur. In this project, a partnership has been established with a Native American Pueblo called Oke Owinge. Dr. Moreau invited me to participate in a project meeting that included faculty, staff, and students. I was blown away by the level of ownership the students had in this research, as well as their advanced level of creativity and innovation. After the meeting, Fernando Moreau and I recorded the following interview. I'm here at the University of New Mexico. A really exciting day. I got to see a lot of innovation and creation. I'm here with Dr. Fernando Moreau. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for inviting me to this meeting today. We're here at the university. We were talking on the phone quite a bit about the flooding. A lot of people think of New Mexico as a very arid state, and it is dry, but when the monsoon comes especially, a lot of flood risk goes up, and you and your students and faculty and staff have been creating and innovating flood sensors to go out there in the field, right?
Correct. Yeah, the need is there. It was by experience in the recent years, changes in the weather, changes in the environment, the fires actually make the big difference. So that fire changes the flooding, actually. So it's a post-wildfire flooding.
Fernando, could we talk a little bit about that? So New Mexico has some very large mountains, and unfortunately, we've had some really big fire seasons. Like this season, this past spring was, I think, the worst fire season collectively for the state. How does that impact when the monsoon floods come in the summertime?
So it's not a new problem. It has happened in 10 years ago. So we identified that these fires in the summer were followed by the rain in the fall, and that fall flooding was a little different after the fire. It happened in Las Conchas fire in New Mexico. We thought it was the worst, and we were not expecting what this year happened that made things more severe. We got fires 2-3 months sooner, in April, in May, and the monsoon season kicks in June, and now we're having a burnt area exposed to this monsoon, almost daily rain that is running differently than we ever seen before. So we are aware of the problem. It's becoming unexpectedly really larger than we thought, and we are now a little more prepared than before, thanks to the NSF and their last year support of this project, which initially we thought it was going to be important, but this year, for one reason or another, it's becoming more the season where we're going to learn a lot.
Fernando, you were saying not only is the flooding worse downstream from these fire areas, but also it's less predictable, right? Because we, yes, I guess, depend on our flood history, but when you take away the forest and the vegetation, now everything's different, right?
Yes, and flooding, we are aware of being a natural disaster. We are prepared. We have in the research, government, local authorities, companies as a priority. We have models, and with these models, we predict using the rain a flooding flow, a flooding area that we are not shooting on the dark. However, because of the fire, any data that we had before becomes something that is not applicable anymore. So we really need to accept that the science and the knowledge that we have in the models have to be updated with the new post-wildfire soil. You're talking about geological, hydrological conditions that are completely different than how the models were made before the trees were burned.
Fernando, how is your research group addressing this? How are you getting out there and testing and maybe improving the science?
Yeah, so in the research group, we believe in multidisciplinary approach. It's not only a one academic area that is going to solve this problem. So we're working from both sensor technology, owner, and data approach. So the sensors are not new. We believe that if the owner designs the sensor and have control of changing the sensor, they will be prone to use it and collect this data. So we create this low-cost, efficient, wireless intelligence sensor that the owner understands a little more, and also the owner can change the design. It could be that you use a sensor, look at the data, and you want to change the configuration of the sensor. Maybe the water elevation is not enough. We're adding a camera to the sensor, and they're used with the low-cost Arduino sensors. We like to ask the owner, in this case, Okio Wingate, and the leaders in flooding high water mark, what would they like to change? Which locations they want? So they are the ones who know the problem of these burned areas. And also we like the students to go out there and spend a lot of time on the field. We are going frequently, and they are in charge of their sensor networks. These sensor networks are designed from the bottom to the end to the server. So any component that fails, they together identify the error and correct it. Hardware, software, could be the server, could be the interpretation of the data. It's all low cost and low technology, so we can use it fast.
Fernando, when your students get out there in the field, I mean, where are they going? What kind of areas are they trying to measure data?
So the group of students, they are composed typically of one or two leaders, either research staff or PhD students. They have more seniority, and they have a group of minions, if you like, of 3 or 4 undergraduates who are from mechanical, computer science, electrical, civil. We also have high school students helping on the team. So we have also high water mark interns working in high water mark. So this group of 4 or 5 identify 3 or 4 wireless sensor networks that, for example, they were talking about one sensor losing energy because it was overcast on that location specifically. They look at the data on their server and they identify, hey, we need to replace this battery and turn that on. The other problem was the hotspot. The hotspot resets because these are commercial hotspots that are basically working with the sun by themselves, and they identify these hotspots were not designed for this. So they are designing a little robot that turns the hotspot without you having to go there. So they go there and try to install the robot and see if that keeps the hotspot alive. So they have many different areas: mechanical, computer science, the flooding. They decide now we have to go to Las Vegas, New Mexico. Why? Because that's where the burn area is, and that's where we're worried we're going to have the destruction. So they talk together and they go and address the issue at the spot.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation to join the meeting today. I was amazed. I'm like, wow, these students are building this technology, building robots and things like that, and then taking them out in the field to measure these data.
Yes, you talk about the overheating problem. They do a little simulation. They're going to identify the voltage of the fan that they're going to put on their box. I think the most impressive part for me is that they feel comfortable sharing new ideas without the fear of being wrong. So they feel very supported to try something that may or may not be final. But they share something and they say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Let's go to the second step. So that gives them a lot of trust and confidence, and also not fear to being wrong, not fear to talk about something different.
How do you create a research group where students feel the freedom and courage to experiment and try new things, and build that confidence into them?
Maybe you need to combine different differences. So differences could be on majors, it could be in experience. For example, we have non-engineers in the group that are the same. We don't treat them differently. If we have a high schooler, we don't treat the high schooler different. We have someone that is more senior that comes without possibly the same academic background. We believe there is we like different. We like different contribution, and also we protect it. So we encourage different contributions, and we know that we will learn from different contributions. So we prefer to not be intimidated for things that we don't know. We prefer to be open about the things that are new, and listen to the different areas. Yeah.
One of the things that really impressed me in the presentation was one of the university students that was helping out with a field trip where middle school and high school students were out there with sensors. And you had shared, this is even a different angle, a different perspective that younger scientists would have. I really respected and admired that you guys are engaged a lot with not only college students, but also middle school and high school.
Well, it also brings a meaning for the PhD students. Keep in mind the impact that this fundamental research in sensors or sensor networks or augmented reality will have in the technical world is one part of it. If you have impact in these young, bright high schoolers, and you give them something beyond what they thought they were going to do, they will contribute to your research group. They are ready to contribute. We don't think we're doing them a favor. I think they are doing us a favor.
Yeah, and this is real world science that can get them excited, right? Sometimes we think back to high school where it was just, a lot of book study and people can get intimidated. I've even seen 15, 16-year-olds that say, I'm just not good at science. And it's maybe because they struggled with the book side, but then some of this hands-on side, they can say, wait, I'm actually very good at science. I just didn't realize it.
So for the project that we do with Lewis, we identify that if you build a sensor with your hands, you will love data. The mathematics become your passion. Now that you collect this data, you want to plot it, you want to analyze it, only by connecting the cable. So we did this project, and the survey from the high schoolers say, connecting cable is making friends. Once you give them that 30 minutes on building the sensor on the train, on the tramway, on the classroom, in 30 minutes, they believe if they connect the cables together, they're going to be discovering something with those cables of the data that it becomes theirs.
It's almost like they have more ownership, right? Like they actually help build this sensor that can be deployed, right?
Yeah, and maybe related to the post-wildfire, we believe the design of the perfect sensor is the one that comes from the owner. So that sense of I can design my sensor differently enables not only a community in New Mexico of Okiowinge, but also the youth. The youth, if you give them the control of their future and the power to create something that is their idea, we are missing that. I think we're not doing it enough, actually. I think we're just starting. We need to give them the ownership of their future by they build their sensor differently because they are smart.
The concept is they went out and maybe deployed something that they built as opposed to giving them something someone else built and say, here, put this out in the world.
Find the errors yourself and try to correct them because I know you can do it. That's what we want to tell them.
You're partnering a lot with High Watermark, and
yes.
They have a very high number of workers that are from Native American background as well, right?
Yeah, so we are very lucky. We are working with a leader in this technology environmental disaster, Phoebe Swina, and she's a firm believer of the supporting the youth, Native American youth, and she's in the project that we have with the Sue and the NSF. They hire interns in high water mark that are probably interested in contributing to their history, to their land, to their property, and they are self-motivated to come up with a new idea that is priceless. And when you give them the power to design the sensor and put it in different locations, it's their idea and it's their contribution to their pueblo and to their tribe and to their ancestors. Another aspect of this collaboration with High Water Mark is they it's a small business owned by Phoebe, and she's really thinking for the future, the sustainability of this effort. We believe these initiatives can be self-sustained. So these youth, these high schoolers or college students can start their sensor company, and they can contribute in a sustainable way to other lands that are not as New Mexico, we need help, and we have a lot of short time now to prepare for this flooding, but they identify other Native Americans, for example, in Alaska, where it's cold and it's difficult to move from site to site, and you're talking about very low temperatures where the sensors could help them too. So we're not only Okio Wingate and High Water Mark are looking not only on the New Mexico, central New Mexico, we're looking through entire state, and we want to have a sustainable approach for rural communities across the nation and maybe around the world.
I could see universities playing a big part of that. I got started in my professional science work in Alaska, and we were working with Native Alaskan villages, and they would often send middle school, high school students to Fairbanks to come to our university to a workshop, and then they would take what they learned back to their village, and we thought it's kind of what you're talking about here, about getting these university students or even high school students, from the villages to understand about the science and about technology, but then to take that back to their villages.
Yeah, and the project actually is Smart and Connected Communities. It's an initiative from the National Science Foundation, more in a traditional world. You think smart and connected communities could be very signal and Internet of Things. NSF decided to create a community center civil innovation challenge, which is about the community is the center of the innovation. So in our project, the native knowledge of flooding and fire informs the sensor, and we respect their thousands of years of being engineers, being programmers, creating these algorithms of what is safe, what is not safe, and they design the sensor with their own knowledge that we may not even know, and we don't need to.
You're building into this very deep history, right, for hundreds of years back of them knowing the landscape, the environment, the nature, and then using that knowledge to help with these projects.
Yeah, and it's also a sovereignty issue. We've been working with cybersecurity with the Navy, and we are bringing this cybersecurity protection on the Lewis sensor network. So when we have the server and the access to data, it's only for the people who needs to read about the most sacred component, which is water, because water is something that we want to respect, and it was given by the council members. They told us this is a sacred information and they want to keep it that way, and we are ensuring that is cyber secure project for them.
Yeah, that's very important and very culturally sensitive. Fernando, where does NSF come into this? Is this a new initiative with NSF, or has this been going on for some time?
This is very new. They identified the importance of having this smart and connected community center in a community, and they created 2 years ago the call for proposal. It's the first time that they've done it, 2020. At the University of New Mexico, we put together a group, Zhang in the Department of Geography, Science, Data, Mark Stone here on Civil, Yolanda Lin in Geography, and then we have Carrie Hushman in Educational Psychology, High Water Mark, Phoebe Swina. We proposed this community center innovation project, civic innovation project, and it was extremely competitive, but I think because the reality of the success is that we believe the community is designing the solution. We are respecting their idea is the right idea, not the university idea. It has to be the community idea. The community may change their mind. We like that too. The community may identify different location. We follow them. That's the NSF likes that.
So on this type of project, the community is really driving the ship. They're making the decisions of what needs to be done and prioritizing where the science should go.
That the community is the captain, the community is the decision maker, and we are here to enable opportunities that maybe make sense for them, and we listen to what they want, and they choose if they want to change them or transform them, and we are here for them.
Wow, that's a very high impact approach, as opposed to just the university saying we should do this and then trying to go out into the world and push that, right? You're starting with the community first. They're helping guide the science, and then you're there to support them.
Yeah, the university should be the guide and also the one in charge, but not in theory. Also, they have to be part of the criticism and the feedback, and we believe this community is the one that tell us, hey, we want more sensors in a different location. And when we do that, they have a reason that we may not even know, but at least we know is what they told us to do.
Yeah, you're aligning with where they want to go with that. Fernando, how can people find you guys online, or how can people find your research group if they want to emulate, model new work after what you're doing here?
Sure. So the research group, they can put my name, Fernando Moreau, Moreu, Smart Management of Infrastructure Laboratory. We have a website at the University of New Mexico, smilav.unm.edu. The project, we created a project with the support of the NSF Civic project, is lewisnetwork.org. They can do the search on Lewis, Lewis network.org, and they can take a look there.
Have you seen interest come from other states yet with this? Or I know you're innovating really new things here.
The Civic project has more visibility that I noticed, because now every time we go to conferences, they put University of New Mexico, and they know the project is doing very well. They want to hear more about the stage where we're at, especially 1 year, 1 million is a very intense against the clock effort. So the work that the students are doing and the partners supporting is very. We are in the month 8 of the project, and we already have all the sensors collecting this rain data that you saw today. We are against the clock, and we are we're very glad to have the support from NSF to do this.
Well, congratulations. I know you guys are up against some pretty big hazards here with drought, wildfire, and floods, sometimes all coming within a short amount of time. But I really admire that you guys are out there innovating science and engaging with college students, even high school students, and just getting out there to understand the science better and improve our forecasting. Thank you for coming on the podcast, and I look forward to following the work that you're doing and your research group as well into the future.
Thank you. Glad to help.
Dr. Moreau, thank you so much for sharing those insightful perspectives with us. I love what you said about students loving data and scientific analysis if they build and deploy their own sensors. That's a hands-on perspective that we can apply to every level of education, from grade school to students in high school, college, and graduate degree programs. On my visit to the University of New Mexico, I was also able to meet with Dr. Zhang, Associate Director at the Earth Data Analysis Center, or EDAC. He joined EDAC as a graduate student and became a part of the EDAC staff in 2017. Dr. Zhang received his PhD in civil engineering from the University of New Mexico in 2017. He also has a master's degree in GIS science and construction management. His research focuses on leveraging GIS, remote sensing, and drone technologies for infrastructure management, and he has many peer-reviewed publications in this field. Dr. Zhang is co-principal investigator on the NSF-funded project where students are building sensors. After the project meeting, we recorded the following interview together. I'm here at University of New Mexico. What a day. We saw a lot of creation and innovation. I'm with Zhang, a faculty here at University of New Mexico. I appreciate you taking time to come on the podcast.
Glad to be here. Yeah.
So Zhang, you actually were a graduate from this department, and then you went on to get even multiple master's degrees, right?
Yes, I do. I got my master degree of construction management back to 2010. And then went to GeoTrek a really short time for 1 year and a half. And I still decide, I really like the city of Albuquerque. That's like my second hometown. Originally, I'm from Beijing, but I really like Albuquerque. So I decided to transfer back to University of New Mexico and get my second master degree in geography. And then while I'm doing my second master degree, I decided to do my PhD. So I have 2 degrees running at the same time. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
Well, and really a diverse background both in engineering and in geography and geospatial science.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I do enjoy the interdisciplinary, engineering or science background. I benefit a lot from it, because I can solve problems not from geography side, but also can solve real world problem in civil engineering. So, and I think geospatial engineering is a term, I really like to refer to. People ask me, what do you do? I always tell people I'm a geospatial engineer because we are trying to use geospatial technologies to solve civil engineering problems. I'm trying to build a program here at the University of New Mexico, trying to train a new generation of engineers, not only to use traditional civil, engineering expertise or skills to solve problems, but also using geospatial technologies. That's my ultimate goal, to try to build a program like that.
So for those students that have a background, say in construction engineering or civil engineering, but they also have some geographic information systems, remote sensing, things like that, how do you feel like them also developing some geospatial skills can help them out?
Well, that's a really good question. So oftentimes I have, requests from for state agencies like New Mexico Department of Transportation. They say we need to do some modeling, transportation modeling. We need them to know GIS because we know it's all locational based, right? So for any of the locational based services, we do need to know their location using GIS skills. So when they learn this GIS skill, remote sensing, they can help with civil engineering in terms of construction, in terms of design, in terms of planning. Think about, again, an example is transportation. It's geospatially spread out, right? So if you use traditional, point-based trying to solve a, transportation system issue, that won't help you because, like I said, transportation network is, in nature, is spread out. So that's the geospatial, or that's the geographic in the nature. Yeah,
I see. So if people can see more in the sense of what was really happening over space,
right,
they could see maybe where transportation routes are going. And really with GIS, it's digital map layers, right? So you're overlaying maybe a floodplain or land use, things like that on top of your transportation and demographic layers as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we have to think about this. Not on the ground anymore. Traditionally, civil engineering is boost on the ground. They solve problems on the ground. But when we have geospatial engineering capabilities, you are going to solve the problem in the air. You're going to see the information in the air, above the ground, right? So you see how the, when we do geospatial, or we call it spatial analysis, you are going to see some patterns that you will never observe on the ground, right? So that's the spatial analysis. That's the power of spatial analysis. We can reveal a lot of the patterns that we will never observe in the past.
And Sue, let's talk a little bit about this. You've done some work with unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, things like that, like different ways to actually get up above the land and record some imagery, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I do that. That's part of my research focus. I really like using UAS as a platform to collect data because, when we're trying to solve an engineering problem or other problems, there are two folds or two sides of the problem-solving process. One is we have to collect data. We need that data to make decisions. We need to know what's going on. And then we analyze that data. So to me, these two parts work concurrently. Without one of them, we cannot solve the problem. But in the past, I think we focused more on the data analysis side, not really on the data collection side, because we have a lot of limitations. But because of advancement of technology, now because we can use the unmanned aircraft systems, we can collect data above the ground. And then my focus here is trying to using different type of sensors to collect the image. We can use digital cameras. We can get aerial photo, we call it. We could also put the sensor on a satellite platform, that is a satellite image. We could also put a LiDAR, is like a light ranging detection, like onto aircraft or manned aircraft or unmanned aircraft, and then we can get LiDAR data. We also have a sonar sensor, we also have radar sensor. There are all kinds of sensors. And my focus is optical sensors, like digital cameras or LiDAR sensors. And then we collect two-dimensional data. And then our focus here at the University of New Mexico is trying to derive three-dimensional information from that overlapping two-dimensional aerial photos. And then we call it aerial triangulation or structure from motion. But the idea of that is trying to build three-dimensional information from two-dimensional image. And the two-dimensional image has to be overlapped. And then we can use aerial triangulation to try to get three-dimensional information.
People often think of floodplain maps as a two-dimensional thing, right? You have that piece of paper or that digital map. But, for example, could we take those flood waters and actually make that a three-dimensional visualization to say, okay, what if there was 5 feet of water over the ground? What would that look like? Is that the kind of thing that we could maybe map out in 3D?
Yes, absolutely. We could do that. And it's happening, actually. Traditionally, GIS is not as good as other software programs trying to visualize three-dimensional information. There are a lot of reasons, but part of the reason is the idea behind the GIS is trying to take that spatial context. It's all like a big coverage or large coverage on the ground. But now, recent years, in the past 5 years or 3 years, I would say, we can see that GIS is getting better and better visualizing three-dimensional information, especially the thing you just mentioned, the floodplain modeling. We can, with really good GPU, graphic processing unit, we can see that three-dimensional information.
So New Mexico has a lot of different hazards. We have tremendous drought, wildfires, floods, all these different things. How could you see, say, like drones or unmanned aerial vehicles collecting data that maybe help with some of the disaster response?
Sure, yeah. Drone has a lot of strength, although it also has limitations. But one of the strengths is in remote sensing, we call it a temporal resolution. It is literally the frequency, how frequently you can collect the data. So imagine you are collecting data with, a manned aircraft. You have to take off. You have to need a maintenance for the aircraft. You have limited time window to fly fly. But with drone, you have really much higher temporal resolution than the manned aircraft. Is that literally as long as the weather is allowed, or the weather condition is allowed, then you can fly. Of course, you have to get permission from Federal Aviation Administration. But once, let's assume everything is being approved, you could collect the data as much as you want, basically. So the idea the real power of using UAS or unmanned aircraft systems is that you collect a base map. When there are no disaster happen, you always just collecting, depend on your budget. You collect the base layer. We call it the time 1 layer. Immediately after a disaster happen, you collect the time 2 layer or the time 2 image. And then you have a pre-disaster image and a post-disaster image. And then you can do change detection. That's the real power of drone. And then, I know building the base layer is taking time and time consuming. It is a labor intensive process. But once we have that base layer and once a disaster happens, you collect the time 2 image. And then immediately you can do the change detection. So
you're saying you can get a drone up maybe right before a disaster and right after the disaster if you have the approval to fly, and all of a sudden you can just do a change detection map right there, just from those 2 flights.
Right, exactly.
And like you said, you can do it much more frequently than maybe waiting for satellite passes to come over your location.
Right. The fastest satellite image, I know that they probably can re-image the same area on a daily basis. That's possible. But with UAS or drones, we could do that literally every hour or every 30 minutes, depending on how frequently you want to go, right?
Yeah, I was out in the desert actually 2 nights ago, and there was a big rainstorm. It was amazing how quickly the floodwaters came over this area. Some of these hazards here, they're happening very quickly. Mm-hmm. So I think if you can get out and detect them and use drones or UASs, you probably have a big advantage, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So what about the work with the students and the different research teams here? What kind of work are you engaged in with the university students?
Well, I interact with quite a few different groups of students. We have students from civil engineering background. We have geography students. We also have like a Earth and planet science student. We also have students from regional and community planning. So my student is all from different, really diverse background. I really like that diverse, team that everybody has their own expertise. And, geography, although I'm a faculty professor in geography, but, geography in the nature, it is interdisciplinary, right? Geography does a lot of things, like we have physical geography, we have human geography, we have GIS, we have remote sensing, now we have geospatial engineering. So it's kind of like a melting pot that it can use any sort of expertise to solve the environmental issues, solve infrastructure issues. It is really diverse. And working with the student here at UM is that one benefit is that our student is a lot of them from minority group student, like Native American students. We also have, Hispanic students here.
Yeah, so sometimes in academia, I hear people say that we use a word called siloed. It's like everyone's in the same group, like everyone is a geographer or everyone is an engineer, or even, like you said, culturally, everyone is the same race or the same gender. Right. When you mix, like you're saying, diversity on your team, I would imagine sometimes you get a really good crossover where you have people coming from different backgrounds working together, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then I really make my team has like a kind of like a bigger brother or bigger sister thing going on, is that having them to teach each other to learn that, and then like a family, like my research group is really like a family.
Could you explain big brother, big sister? So there may be like an older student that's partnered with a new student or something like that?
Exactly like that, yes. So if we have a senior, like for undergrad student, if we have senior student, they become a bigger brother or bigger sister. And then for junior or younger student coming here, they pass along their knowledge to them, and then that is really also make our research group really sustainable, and then also make them feel like they are part of the family, not like they are not doing the research work by themselves. They have helpers, they have assistants, they have guidance, they have resources, right? So, and then one of the things I also encourage them to do is trying to reach out to all the other research groups. Like exactly today, you were in the meeting, for example, I'm working with also Dr. Fernando Moreau. We have a lot of projects working together. And our research group, they work also together.
Yeah, that's so helpful when you know people outside of your research group that maybe know how to do computerized mapping or mathematics or whatever it is, right? Maybe a different part of technology. When you have these contacts and relationships, I think, in all these different groups, I think it can really make you a much stronger scientist.
Absolutely, yes.
So I appreciate you taking time to come on the podcast. How can people find out about your research group or the work that you're doing, maybe on the web or just follow you online?
Sure, yeah. Well, so I'm primarily associated with research center here on campus called Earth Data Analysis Center, EDAC. So if you go to edac.um.edu, you will find a lot of project portfolios we have been doing. We have been doing a lot of FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency projects. We have been doing a lot of Department of Homeland Security projects. But primarily all these projects focus on geospatial or GIS and remote sensing. We another way to find more research about me, if you just Google my name, Su Zhang, S-U, like S like Sierra, U like uniform, and then my last name is Zhang, Z-H-A-N-G, U-M, you will find more information about me. And all my publications in Google Scholar, it's all there.
Yeah, so I really want to follow your research group here. I was really impressed by the work you're doing, the engagement with students, and also that you're creating new science here. There are a lot of groups, I think, that sometimes kind of just, recirculate other people's work. You're really creating and innovating your own science right here, and then, getting this out to the residents of your state to really help them. So I was really impressed by what I saw, and I'm excited to follow you guys in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Dr. Zhang, thank you so much for taking time to come on the GeoTrek podcast. We learned a lot from you, like the practical applications of combining engineering with geospatial science. I wanted to touch on some specific language used to describe geospatial science. Geospatial is a common word used to describe technology that includes mapping and spatial analysis. Another related term is the acronym GIS. This field became popular in the 1990s and originally stood for Geographic Information Systems. In recent years, many people define GIS as Geographic Information Science. Others talk about Geographic Information Technology. These terms are used to describe digital mapping programs that are basically smart maps. When you pull up a map on your smartphone and you see an info box pop up when you click on a building, that's GIS behind the scenes putting information on that map. If you're interested to study GIS or pursue a degree in it, check out the Department of Geography in your local university or college. Remote sensing is the science of collecting and interpreting scientific data from a distance. Dr. Zhang referred to drones, unmanned aerial sensors, and satellites for data collection. These all fit into the field of remote sensing. Remotely sensed data, such as drone or satellite imagery, can then be brought into GIS for analysis. I wanted to add a comment about what Dr. Zhang said about his research group operating like a family with older students mentoring younger ones. This ties in very closely with perspectives shared by Fernando Moreau. An important insight for our young scientists considering undergraduate or graduate studies, this type of internal mentorship will take you to the next level in your academic experience. When you are mentored by an older student, you get a lot of help and perspective, and sometimes access to a person that may have more time and availability than many professors. When you are the older student mentoring, it helps you learn and teach the science better and provides encouragement about how far you've come. Not all academic departments have such healthy perspectives. As a prospective student, take time to ask about mentorship within academic programs and feel free to reach out to faculty, staff, and students with questions about this concept. It really will transform your academic experience. Before we close out this episode, I wanted to give a shout out to Phoebe Sweeney and High Watermark Consulting. Fernando Moreau mentioned them a few times. High Watermark is a 100% Native American woman-owned environmental consulting company with a specialty in water resources. Owner Phoebe Sweeney has 20 years of experience providing environmental and water resources engineering, science, planning, and management to New Mexico communities, ranging from pueblos to local, state, and federal agencies, in addition to private industry. The focus of High Watermark has been flood disaster and emergency response, including flood hazard mitigation planning, stormwater management, and watershed rehabilitation for the protection of both cultural and natural resources in their client communities. They work extensively with the Native American population and are doing very innovative work. I was able to touch base with Phoebe Sweeney multiple times by phone, usually while she was driving or on conference calls. She's super busy and could not do an interview, but I really appreciate the time that she took. She always got back to me or made some time to give me some perspectives and to help me out with information about the great work they're doing. Wow, what an episode. I feel like I'm just catching my breath. This is one of my favorite episodes we've ever recorded because there's so much hope and encouragement when we take the steps to train our students from grade school to graduate school to create and innovate so we can do great science and better understand the world around us. Special thanks to our GeoTrek production team for their great work on these episodes. Jeremiah Long is behind the scenes making the audio magic happen, and we have an excellent team involved in social media, publicity, and marketing of this content, including Senneth Baker, Ashley Anderson, Amy Wilkins, Helen Sabato, and Chris Cook. I'm your podcast host, Dr. Hal Needham, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the GeoTrek podcast when we come back to the Land of Enchantment for one last time in our 3-part series on New Mexico. We'll catch you on the next episode. Hey everyone, this is Dr. Hal. Thank you so much for listening to the GeoTrek podcast. If you're wondering how we come up with such interesting topics each week, we rely on an amazing global community to help direct our scientific fieldwork, articles, and podcasts. If you have an idea for a topic or can connect us to an outstanding future podcast guest, please reach out to us on our website at geo-trek.com or on our Facebook group called GeoTrek the Community. On behalf of our GeoTrek production team, this is Dr. Hal. I'll catch you on the next episode of the GeoTrek podcast.